What's the fastest way to reach sky limit in Minecraft? Back in 2015, Mumbo Jumbo looked for the fastest elevator at the time. But with nearly 5 years of updates since, there's plenty of new methods to see, which are both stranger and faster than before. So today, let's find out the new current champion. And hey, the YouTube genies let me know that the fastest anyone has ever subscribed to the channel is 2 seconds flat. So if you think you can do it faster, speedrun to that subscribe button down below. It's free, and it helps out a ton. Firstly, one of the most basic ways to get up to build limit has to be by jumping up blocks one at a time. And hey, no surprise to anyone, it's not exactly fast, but it is pretty easy to set up, and it's definitely reusable if you're trying to get up and back down from somewhere high up. But at 95 seconds to get from sea level to build limit, it's not exactly one of our best picks on the list. Because while it might be easy to place all those 1 block high incremental jumps, it's so much better to just place down some actual stairs that you crafted. With these in place, we maintain the ability to sprint, which is a huge help if you're trying to get up somewhere fast. And you can see in the results, when we stop nursing that jump button and instead let the stairs do the work, we can go so much faster up here. And in fact, we did it in about a third the time. And while that's not mind-bogglingly fast, it is pretty impressive that if you take the time to lay this out, you'll actually get quite a bit of results. And if you want to set up more bang for your buck with that staircase, you can actually go up those stairs quite a bit faster with a speed 2 effect. And whether you choose to do this with a beacon or a potion effect, you're going to be fine either way, because that buff is going to shave some valuable seconds off your time. Which proves that if you're going to be going up and down that staircase quite a bit, it's worth taking the extra time to set up a beacon and get yourself going that little bit faster. You know where the speed effect doesn't quite help you is with a snow staircase. Yeah, for the sake of being thorough, we tested this one as well. And well, this is just a crazy sight to see. Being over 1,500 blocks wide, it's even less practical to do. The time that this mess clocked in at was 4.5 minutes, which to put that in perspective, that would be going nearly 11 times up that staircase that we built earlier. The regular staircase puts this to shame so much, it's not even worth looking at the snow. And if you think that the speed 2 effect is going to help you here, don't even get your hopes up, because I tested it and it doesn't even get it going under 2 minutes. I can't even put my mind around that. It's just that slow. Absolutely do not use a snow staircase. Because really, to an extreme effect, that does show the problem with having staircases, that they're just so wide that they leave such a footprint on your world. Really, if you're looking to sacrifice some speed for a smaller footprint, then pillaring is an obvious choice. While sure, this clocks in as just about as fast as jumping up the blocks one at a time, it's so much more accessible to do. All you need is a couple of junk stacks of blocks in your inventory, and all of a sudden, the tops of mountains, even the tallest ones, are completely within your reach. But if you're a fan of the accessibility and not so much the speed, that's fine too, because like the speed effect, we actually can use potions to increase our time here. This time, loading up Jump Boost 2 will get us a fully fledged pillar in about half the time that we would regularly. And overall, while pillaring is good for a one-off occasion, if you're going to be using it all the time to get up to your sky base, it just gets less and less desirable. But hey, you don't just have to use that water bucket to get down from the top, because as you know, if you've played in a water world, we can just as easily use it to get up to the sky high. Now, still water is going to be preferable for this, even if it is harder to set up from such a great height. By simply holding spacebar in one of these still water streams, we can actually get up to the top reasonably fast. Look, it's not the worst of the bunch, but with water we can do so much better. If you don't want to leave a massive water tube going up to your base that's not even that fast, then water bucket climbing is a pretty good alternative. Only downside is as you keep pressing right click to rappel up the side of the building, you'll notice that without the proper technique, there's so much room for human error to screw you up. What I will admit with our data is we're not exactly working with the best attempt when we show you the numbers. But what I will say is, even with the best possible technique I could think of, it's so quickly outpaced by some of the other methods, I think it's not a worry. So unless you're using that water bucket to get to the top of obsidian pillars in the end, I don't think it's going to be that helpful for you. Instead, do yourself a favor, place down that water, and use some soul sand to get yourself a real boost. By making one of these bubble elevators, we can shoot up to the top in 353 ticks. And folks, that's just by standing still. If we sprint swim up that very same stream, then we will launch ourselves up to the top in 314 ticks. This is definitely the champion of water bucket based travel. And yeah, I'll admit, it is somewhat of a pain to set up, because you do have to have source blocks all the way up from that soul sand. But as long as you're using the kelp trick, you can turn all of those blocks into sources pretty easily. And from there, all you're left with is a beautiful way straight up to the top. That is, it's beautiful until you decide to break it, in which case you're gonna get so much flooding over your landscape. Okay, in that case, if you're looking for a teeny tiny footprint, then nothing really beats scaffolding. All it takes is one of these blocks as base, and then from there, quite literally, the sky's the limit. Just hold down right click and you're gonna shoot it off into the moon. Only problem is, as fun and fast as it is to set one of these up and tear it down, that speed doesn't really carry through with how fast you're able to climb it. Sure, it's faster than some of the methods we talked about, but it still ranks among some of the stinkers of the bunch, proving that scaffolding's purpose is really just a clean form of pillaring, which, in fairness, I think that's all it's supposed to be. But who knows, maybe you're tired of building the blocks to the sky, and instead, you'd rather have the blocks take you themselves to the sky. And of course, with the power of beast snot and pistons, you can do just that. As far as pure style points, I don't think many of the picks on the list can rival the flying machine. And while you can rest assured knowing that you'll look good as you go up to the sky limit, it's not gonna take you there any faster. You see, in my testing, the time from this was only one tick off from regular pillaring, which is fractions of seconds. It's so close that it could have just been command block or human error, who knows? And the data itself speaks that this is one of the slowest ways to get yourself up to build limit. But is it one of the fanciest? Oh, absolutely. And hey, it requires a lot less placing blocks than some of the other methods. I think there is merit here. It's just not in the speed category. Or if you don't want to learn all that complex machinery to build one of these rides up to the sky, then using mob power is another option. And while shulkers might seem like the obvious choice, when you look at the data, they absolutely do not stand out that way. Clocking in, it took nearly 4 minutes to get from point A to point B in our testing, which for all of the effort that it takes to set one of these up, especially in survival, this is just about as impractical and slow as doing it with the snow staircase. As anyone who's ever gotten the shulker-based achievement knows, there's so much variation with one of these things. And your time on this course can depend on so many different factors, like how many times you get hit by the shulker, or whether or not you lose any levitation in between sets. Oh, and don't forget all the damage you're gonna sustain during this thing. Unless you're eating something good, you're gonna die on the way up, no question. Really, leave the shulkers in the end, because we have so many better picks over here in the overworld for mob-based staircase. Like, how about using a horse? And no, not by jumping, but instead, just going up a simple staircase. Now, in fairness, we did use the fastest possible horse in survival for this. Keep that in mind when I say the results are oh so impressive, because 20 seconds for this tall of a trek is insane. Granted, during that attempt, the horse wasn't temperamental or bucking in any kind of way, because if that does happen, it will slow you down. But even then, this is a pretty decent option, and it definitely makes that staircase you built earlier a whole lot more worthwhile. Or if you're looking to drive up some real horsepower, then a thin horse staircase is what you want. By using certain blocks with weird hitboxes that just keep getting thinner and thinner, like cakes that we use in this example, you can clock up so much speed as you run up to the top. Just like that, we clocked in at hitting the target in less than 10 seconds. I can't even wrap my head around it. That turns your stallion into a spaceship. And even better to know is that horse speed does not greatly impact this method, so whether you got the fastest possible horse in survival, or just one in your backyard, it's still gonna do pretty great with this method. As long as no hungry souls come in to eat the cake, I think you're pretty set with this one. But if you don't have any horses nearby and you still want to hitch a ride, then a powered minecart rail is still pretty good. With consistent powered rails all the way up the slope, we were able to clock in at 24 seconds for the time. Which, for a method where all you gotta do is just place down your minecart, sit back and ride, is pretty nice to have. And we can push that ride even further if we use the same redstone we used to power those rails to instead build a slime block minecart elevator. Now, besides being one of the most fun picks on the list, this also clocks in some pretty decent speed. As the elevator bounces our way to the top, we're able to handle this in 11 seconds. Which means I gotta say, if you're saving up your slime blocks for a flying machine, maybe put one of these on your list instead. It's even more reusable and that much quicker to get yourself right up to the top. And if you don't want to work with minecarts, then a piston elevator can also fit that bill. Now, the stability on one of these can be a little bit more finicky than some of the other elevator designs, so for our testing we decided to go with one that's much more stable for multiplayer, but it isn't the fastest piston elevator on the market. Regardless, as much as I love piston elevators, whether it's this one or one of the faster builds, they're still put to shame by other picks on the list. But if you're looking for a killer way to get up to that penthouse apartment, this is still a pretty rockin' choice to put in your build. Now, piston elevators are great if you're sick of minecarts, but what if the minecarts are sick of you? Funnily enough, with a couple hundred activator rails, we're able to see just that. Laying it out like such, we get sort of an ejector rail situation going on here. And if you're just holding down right mouse button, it's gonna do alright to get you to the top, in about 19 seconds. But for the sake of being thorough, we also looked at how we could do this with a right-click macro. And folks, when you use one of those, you can throw the other times off of the board, because doing this, we got 4.9 seconds. Although, if macros aren't your style and instead you'd rather just hold down right-click, then a minecart tube laid out like this is still going to do a pretty great job. Even with a method as simple as holding down the button, we can clock in at 9.5 seconds here. With that same right-click macro that we talked about in the last one, using it here only gets us 0.05 seconds return. But if you don't want to be using macro scripts every time you try to get up to your base, then building one of these over the last one is a pretty awesome pick. But as much as you love holding down right click, you're not going to be able to do it on this next one. Because as soon as we start to talk about ender pearls, the cooldown doesn't even let us hold down right click. Instead, for this method, we're going to have to hold down the shift key, because every time that we go up, we have to hold on for dear life to one of these ladders. Which is perilous, but hey, it's a pretty fair trade-off for not having to use any redstone on the build. And with a 12-second time, you can clock in some pretty great speed with one of these. Although, keep in mind that ender pearls are pretty inconsistent by nature, so they are going to have some variation in the way that you throw them. And while that's not really an issue with this, if you don't align yourself perfectly at the beginning and throw those pearls at the right intervals, you will start to see some rubber banding as previous pearls start to launch you back and lose your progress. Plus, if you don't want to align one of those ender pearls yourself, don't sweat it, this machine will do it for you. And better yet, it'll do it a whole lot faster than that previous method. This design touts around 20 blocks per second in its method, which folks, I've got to say, is crazy to see happen. Unfortunately though, there are some things with this mechanism that don't exactly seem intentional. And while I won't bog this down too much with the nitty-gritty, I will say that Fallen Breath has a beautiful video about the design of this thing, and I highly recommend you check it out if you're interested. So, we can see that using projectiles is a pretty fast way up to sky limit. But what if you yourself want to be a projectile? Well, Evel Knievel, there is an option for that, and I gotta say, it's a pretty great one at that. By letting all of the explosives fill into the water, as soon as they start to go off, boom, you'll send yourself right into the stratosphere. Unfortunately to note, this can be somewhat inconsistent in survival, where some methods will launch you 75 blocks, and others will launch you the full 400. Even with those inconsistencies, this is still going to get you to the top of the world in around 5 seconds. That's nuts. And while it's easy to get caught up in such a crazy speed, don't forget to pack on some blast protection on your armor. Otherwise, this will take you to your grave even faster than the build limit. Now, a much safer option that still uses that same gunpowder from your creeper farm is an elytra rocket spam. Worth mentioning for our testing, we were holding down rockets and spamming them all the way up to the top. Which if you do that, you better have a good supply of fireworks, because this will eat through your supply like no other. But with that greediness comes some pretty great results. By being able to hit our target in just over 6 seconds, it's clear why this is an endgame pick. It's that good. And while that might be one of our better picks when the sky is clear, as soon as you start to see a bit of overcast overhead, then it's time to whip out the trident. And for good reason. Using one of these things can get you from sea level to sky limit in around 2 seconds. 2 seconds, folks, and I thought that was just how fast people subscribe to the channel. But no, it's literally how quick you can get yourself from point A to point B by using one of these 3-pronged forks. Now obviously, unless you're in Seattle, you're not going to be using one of these with the rain all that often. But when you do get the chance, it'll fling you up into the stars, no question about it. And hey, while we're talking about light speed travel, we might as well talk about different dimensions as well. Because nether portals, even though they are awkward to set up and link, can do a pretty great job at sending you up to the top of the building. Now in survival, there is some downside, like you gotta wait until that nether portal sickness gets away before you go in the next time. In creative, that doesn't exist, and we can turn our nearly 11 seconds in survival into 2.3 in creative. And folks, this is the point of the video where I tell you we didn't just look at survival methods, but for the sake of being thorough, we also covered every creative mode and command line option I could think of. Just to rattle through some of those, creative mode flight is reliable, but surprisingly slow, making spectator mode at max scroll wheel the best for fly arounds. Also, potion effects can do crazy work, with both max levitation and max jump boost giving us some of the best results. But don't go past 127 on either of them or they just stop working outright. And even if you can go past 127 like with max speed up to 255, it doesn't even help that much on the stairs. On land you can move around in a blink, but on stairs it's still slower than some of our other options. Not worthwhile. And yes, for all the Einsteins in the comments, teleportation is the best method. Congratulations for remembering that. I'm proud of you. Now, after all that testing, here's the data we got from all of our sideshow experiments. And finally, this is the list adjusted with those creative mode methods in mind. So with that, folks, take a climb to that subscribe button down below, and have a good one. Alright,